Well, thank you, viewers from all over the world who are following us for the next 2 days of the Centre Court MBA Festival. We just had a great session with the directors of admissions at the London Business School, Imperial College Business School, and the Judge Business School at the University of Cambridge. Now, a focus on careers, and perhaps you, understandably, are asking yourselves where the job market for MBA graduates might be in, 2026 or 2027 as you graduate from one of the world's leading business schools. But equally, where will the job market be in 2036 or 37 as you continue this personal journey with an MBA that has transformed the opportunities that you've been able to explore? Well, perhaps to give some substance to all of that, it's a delight to welcome my next set of guests. It's always great to have Conrad Chua. Conrad is the MBA Executive Director at the Judge Business School at Cambridge. He's joined by Anne Alaoui. Anne is the head of both MBA and the Masters in Finance careers at the London Business School, and Lisa Umanyora, who is the Executive Director of Careers and Student Life. I love the association of those two, Lisa. And so in the next 45 minutes, we'll be looking at those incredible opportunities that the graduates of these three extraordinary schools get to explore. I mean, Conrad, when we think about next year or 10 years from now, there's perhaps an understandable focus on a job that you might get after you've made this investment in your graduate management education. How do you like to help candidates think not just about that first position, but the impact this is going to have on the 10, 20, the lifetime that lies ahead?
Yeah, Matt, I always tell people that the first job is important, obviously, because they've got to use that to pay the bills, pay the tuition fees. But the value of an MBA or of business school education, it's for life. It's about teaching you the skills that you can use to analyze issues as things change, and things will always change, right? So you've got that kind of analytical toolbox that you can use throughout your career. But I think more importantly, you get to understand a lot more about yourself, about what you're capable of, and how you can really burst through and break through to the next level when you've got people behind you, when you know how to build strong teams that can support one another. And that's the sort of personal, professional development that an MBA and business school education provides. And of course, once you leave the MBA or business school, you've got alumni network for life, which it's almost like having your own personal board of directors who can advise you through the kinds of career changes that you inevitably will have to face. So I think that's the kind of return that people should think about when they're considering an MBA or any kind of business school degree.
Right. And I guess you've just welcomed an incoming class that no doubt showed it up whether I want to become a consultant, I want to move into venture capital. Just as we're getting this session started, how do you like to welcome them? Obviously, enthusiasm about their next career steps, but also encourage them to be very open-minded for the adventure that they're about to follow.
I think that's such a good point, keeping the long term in mind and starting your MBA with a mix of being open-minded, but also having some sense of focus so you can make the most of the resources and the network as you're going through. How do we do that? Yes, with a lot of enthusiasm to begin with. In orientation, I would say it's very hard for the students to avoid Career Center at LBS. We're really front and center with them. But it's not just about the beginning, it's the journey throughout. When it gets tough, when you realize it is an academic degree, how do you juggle your career activities alongside your social activities, traveling, but also the academic requirements? So we're really there supporting the students throughout all of that. And I think it does prepare them for the long term, because it is about those people who have the organizational skills to stay on top of everything that comes at us, all the information, that do the best.
Right. Lisa, with the job title that I shared with our viewers, that puts careers and student life next to one another. So, the students emerge from a class, they can all now read a balance sheet. So what are you then doing to sort of say, well, this is all part of the exploration and how what you're looking for in life can then be, matched with the career goals and objectives that you have.
Yeah, no, exactly, Matt. Thanks, Matt. I think it's really interesting the approach we take at Imperial, as you say, to align careers and student life. I think we really see and want to help students to understand and to make the most of those opportunities they have through the extracurricular, co-curricular activities that they have the opportunity to kind of access. I always talk about this as the MBA as being an opportunity to really experiment, to lean into things that maybe you've not experienced before, to try out things that maybe you hadn't even thought about or heard of previously. And of course, there's an opportunity to even widen and broaden that network further. And also to really think about how you can take the driving seat. Students often tend to follow the crowd. You see so many people happening, people are doing things, there's so much happening around you, and then there's that sense of FOMO kind of appears. It's like, well, everyone's doing this, oh my gosh, maybe I should be doing that as well. Everyone's going into consulting, maybe I should be looking at consulting. Actually, what's right for you? Where do your interests lie? How can you be in control of taking that forward? And through those various opportunities, those partly offered through the student life team and partly through the work we do in careers, it's helping students to explore what does that look like for them. Where are some of their gaps in their experience or in their confidence levels of some of their skills, and what opportunities that are out there, whether it's being a club president or whether it's getting involved in a challenge or whatever it might be, which one will help them to build to create that bridge to build to where they're wanting to get to.
In the earlier session, Conrad, we talked about the University of Cambridge, 800 years of academic excellence. As we look at perhaps the Judge Business School through the lens of careers and that personal development, what do you then see as a key differentiator of Judge in bringing individuals to an environment that is then surrounded by astrophysicists and STEM and everything else that the university has to offer?
I think being part of a university is a great draw for many of our students. And when they get here, obviously they learn a lot within the confines of the business school, but they learn so much more precisely through what you mentioned, speaking with people in engineering and economics through their colleges. And it's that kind of very closely knit community, learning community, where that sort of serendipitous kind of meetings really shine through. I was speaking with Professor Robin Dunbar, who is a sociologist professor at Oxford, and he mentioned how actually things like the Cambridge Molecular Research Lab, where they bring all these great scientists and they make sure that the cafe has great food so that all of them will come to eat and share ideas. Same with the Eagle Pub, where Crick and Watson allegedly met and figured out DNA. It's that kind of environment so that students, I always say students can then draw lines or connect the dots in new and exciting ways that people hadn't seen before. And you could do that. You can do that. You can bring that with you to your next job, your future career. You could start a business using that kind of platform. So I think that's the sort of environment that people can get when they come to Cambridge or to a place where you've got people just outside a business school environment.
Right. It's always ultimately about the food. But if I take Conrad's theme of a laboratory, how does London work as a sort of a living laboratory to then equally enable LBS students to explore their next career steps?
Well, I'm a Londoner by choice, not by birth. And so I really embrace living here because of the diversity. And I know all business schools say that attract a diverse student population. I think the UK, and then on top of it, London adds another level of depth to this. Having been to business school in the US, it's not quite the same. And our students realize that when they come here, they say, oh, I was told it would be diverse. I didn't realize it would be this diverse. Now, diverse isn't always easy. It shows up. Students are put in study groups of 6, and that is organized to maximize the diversity of the members for their maximum learning. But that learning comes with grit and sometimes also difficulties, because you have to bridge the different understanding, the different communication styles. But for me, that's about learning how to learn and how to learn with each other. I think that's fundamental to the business school experience at London Business School.
Yeah. When you start to tap in, Lisa, to interactions, perhaps values, and at Imperial you talk about science for humanity. There's a place for that, right? Of perhaps where someone wants to have impact and the things that matter to them individually and how that might translate into their career choices.
Yes, certainly. And I think, we're definitely seeing a shift in student intentions, in student desires. We're seeing an increase in students wanting to work in companies where the company kind of objectives, if you want, align with the individual's values. Greater thought about how students can have a positive impact, not just on the company that they're working for, not just on their own pocket to pay off those fees that Conrad was mentioning earlier, absolutely, but also to have, a positive impact on society, to think about, to be responsible leaders, if you want. And certainly at Imperial, we have a fantastic Centre for Responsible Leadership, and the director, Professor Celia Moore, delivers our Leads module across our MBA suite of programs, particularly for the full-time MBA, for example, that really helps students to think about how they can become, ethical, socially conscious leaders.
Right. Conrad, we sat down for our first Centre Court event together 7.5 years ago. And if I'd asked you about industry trends that are shaping the future of work, how that might impact MBA graduates in the coming decade, would we have mentioned AI? Well, what are you seeing today and how you think those trends might influence and shape the career opportunities of your graduates?
I think AI is definitely something that everybody has to contend with, whether you're a graduate or someone already in the workforce, because it opens up so many possibilities, but at the same time, you have to think about the ethical considerations and also the change management that comes with introducing new and possibly very disruptive technology, right? So I think AI would be one. I think the other part is the geopolitics, whereas we see different regions, that a golden era of globalization probably being at a pause or maybe even taking steps back, and you're going to see different regions developing in different ways. We see I'm from Singapore, and I can see Southeast Asia, for example, growing very quickly, and there are huge opportunities for young graduates from business schools to go and maybe create a new unicorn that would serve hundreds of millions of new consumers, for example. So I think those kind of aspects, and there's probably other trends that maybe Lisa and would want to touch on, but I think those two sort of come top of mind for me.
Well, I just admitted, Anne, that Conrad and I have been doing these events together for over 7 years. I'm doing MBA fairs for 30, which kind of makes my head spin. And at the time, you might have said, oh, London Business School, finance. Well, finance and London Business School, that's still true, but there's so much more. So, what are some of the industry trends that you're seeing that are really shaping those opportunities?
There is so much more. From our last graduating class, they went on to work for 366 different companies. That would not have been the case 30 years ago when you started doing these. You would have had a much smaller set of companies hiring the majority of the class. So now I think, Lisa, you already mentioned this, the shift in student desires. Students come in with a much broader skill set, much broader range of experience, but also a much broader range of career goals in terms of what they want to use the MBA for. So I think we see that at both ends. So yes, you still have classic consulting, finance. We've had tech, which grew really very large in the LBS environment. But there's so much more. And then I think, what does, for example, tech break into? Conrad, AI everyone has to contend with it, but it's not just a subsegment. It is everywhere in every single industry. So I think you have this fanning out of potential areas where you can apply your MBA knowledge all the way through. We've seen entrepreneurships, especially when it's a challenging job market. More people take on the risk of starting their own. So that is always obviously another option for students.
And perhaps Lisa, it touches on where we started, of looking at today's job market and what that might mean for the coming years. So how are you ensuring that sense of adaptability? You know, Conrad talked about analytical skills, you know, to be able to look at a situation maybe and adapt or pivot. Is that really anchored in the way that you're then working with students to be flexible with the options that they can pursue?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think we are certainly seeing, to the point that others have been making, a shift in the market. I think that, and students need to be flexible and adaptable and resilient. And certainly, both through their personal leadership journey or executive leadership journey, for example, through careers, and through some of their modules on their program, that we certainly help them to develop that and to work through that. I think it's important for us to recognise that the way in which MBA hiring is done has shifted when we talk about some of those kind of trends. That programmatic hiring that maybe has been a bit more typical in the MBA market has certainly been reducing. Just to be clear, that doesn't mean that opportunity is necessarily reducing. It just means that the way in which companies are hiring is shifting. And certainly there's new opportunity that we're seeing coming out in a range of different areas. Particularly where we're seeing fast growth being driven by some of those kind of tech and digitalization areas that we've talked about, but also sustainability that we touched on earlier. So whether that's, opportunity in business intelligence, renewable engineering, renewable energy, for example, maybe it's prompt engineering, impact investing. These are all areas that we've seen a growth in interest, and also kind of anything that relates to ESG. In our last graduating cohort, we saw 10% of our students going on to work in roles that were somehow related to ESG, relatable kind of opportunities and roles of focus. So I think there's definitely shifts. There are changes and there are new opportunities that are coming through. And again, it goes back to that experimentation, helping students to understand the benefit of maybe exposing themselves to something that they hadn't really contemplated before, to see where actually that could be a really great fit and opportunity for them in the future.
As we think about it, Conrad, and perhaps frame it as a leadership path, many of your students will come in with perhaps technical, functional skills. And in the following years beyond the judge at MBA, will go on to take on roles, responsibilities, roles of leadership. So what is the shift that you're then facilitating? Because it's like, well, here's a class on leadership, go out and be a leader. It's not that simple. How are you then preparing them to be able to follow that leadership path?
So I would answer it in two ways. One is, yes, many people come to an MBA with several years of that kind of technical, functional experience. And to get to the next level, you also need to understand how the different building blocks of a business come together. And that's where the core classes that are taught in Cambridge, Imperial, LBS really come and help people to figure out strategy, finance, marketing, etc. But students have to think for themselves and think, well, if I'm going into this company at this particular point in time, how do these building blocks fit together so that it can be successful? So there's the knowledge and skills aspect, but there's also the personal professional development side. And I think in Cambridge, as well as in other business schools, we start by thinking about you as an individual. How do you function? How do you like to work in teams? What's your leadership style? And then extend that to a team. How do successful teams work? How do you turn around teams that have kind of been derailed a bit? And you keep working your way to bigger and bigger contexts. So whether that's managing a business unit, whether that's negotiating at the board level. So I see that as a nice way of marrying both the academic curriculum side with the careers aspects of making you think about how you can increase your personal impact. And in many cases, also being able to put them together in projects that you might be doing, in internships, and sharpening your skill set, both in the terms of the skills and knowledge, but also in terms of your personal impact. So I think that's how people should look at their 1 or 2 years in business school.
And we talked, Dan, about being very open-minded Is there a gear shift? Because you come out of a class on finance strategy, and then working with you and your colleagues in the careers team on personal interdynamics and networking, and I think soft skills is no longer a term that we use it, but it suggests other skill sets that how does this work? Because I always think that your work is like the magic box of business school that's really helping an individual to explore who they are, as Conrad had applied. So how does it work?
So what I love about what I do and what my team do is that in career coaching, especially the one-to-one work we do, you really get to see behind the mask. You get to see what's going on for the individual, for the person, and everybody's got their own journey. So that's the first thing to realize. At the same time, it's the melding together, building on what Conrad said. Yes, you get the academic frameworks and concept, but you absolutely have to go beyond being a consumer of education. And I think this is where business school is fundamentally different from many undergrad programs. You have to be in the driving seat, and our students do that through student-led learning. So we do help them in our career coaching also look at, well, where can they have the biggest impact? And already practice those leadership skills and frameworks while they're on campus. So an example is one of our students leads a team of 40 volunteers. Now, leading volunteers is a challenge in itself. A team of 40, well, that's got some scale to it. So that's like a laboratory where they can already test, what kind of a leader am I in this situation? We also have something called the Leadership Incubator, where faculty support our club leaders through coaching, through academic frameworks, where we really connect all of those dots in what kind of leader do I want to be here for the student cohort. And then that prepares them for life after the MBA too.
Right. If we imagine, Lisa, I worked hard through my undergrad. I actually didn't. And then the early stages of my career, and then you arrive at Imperial, any of these schools. Do you see a sort of an aha moment, because they've been able to step back with the program to really hold up this mirror and reflect on personal values, as Anne said, sort of looking behind the curtain. Do you often see this aha moment where they're learning something deeply important about themselves?
Yeah, and it's such a great example there. I agree fully, Matt, and it's one that's always so wonderful to see. And I think that's one of the reasons that we all work in education, is to see the impact for students. That being involved in that experience can have, and certainly that's that may sometimes be in the classroom, but often it's very much outside of the classroom. With some of the opportunities, and again through careers, and again, as I mentioned, that Leads program at Imperial. There's the opportunity to really grow your personal awareness, and that's often where those aha moments come from. So the Leads module, for example, which focuses on leadership, ethics, awareness, diversity and society, is very much about how you lead, but also you need to have a very strong sense of self-awareness to think about who you are as a person, to understand your impact on others. And that's where the work through the careers-led personal leadership journey really benefits, to help students to kind of broaden their sense of self-awareness, their personal impact. That piece around leadership is very much around your impact as well, considering your impact on others, considering how you can, lead in a very, Anne mentioned it, a very complex, interconnected, cross-cultural world, and the opportunities that students can have to do that, whether it's, again, within their academics, or whether it's maybe some of the student leadership opportunities. It was super fun last weekend. We had our student leadership conference. We had 150 to 200 new student leaders at Imperial at the business school, and the enthusiasm, the excitement that they were bringing to their roles, and the opportunities to have those aha moments are really there just by those opportunities that they're making the most of.
Right. I'm going to shift, Conrad, from the aha moment to the ROI moment. We've all looked at rankings and the media that try to boil it all down to data points, salaries coming out of the program. Now, I'm sure you've been able to think about ROI, including, the increases that all of your graduates see in their salaries. But how do you like to perhaps expand ROI and bring in more intangible elements. Personal confidence, I'm not sure how you measure that, but often, graduates talk about growing levels of self-confidence. So what are the things that you like to consider when you think about the ROI of an MBA?
Well, I think the first part would be take a longer term horizon. So the rankings that you mentioned, they always measure 3 years after someone has graduated. So that's usually at maybe the end of their first job, because most people now switch jobs after 2 or 3 years. And I think if you look at a longer term horizon, and we've seen this over 5, maybe 10 years, that kind of career trajectory that people have been able to make, the salaries that they've been able to get, I think that shows a much more powerful indication of the returns and the enduring returns of business school education at the MBA level. So I think that's one. And the other aspect is when people are able to, well, reaching that maybe C-1 or C-2 levels, where it's no longer the technical skills that you might have learned in accounting or finance that's important, but it's your own personal impact, communication, leadership, empathy. How do you bring diverse voices into the boardroom and give people that sense of shared purpose and vision? I think when I speak to alums, when they reach that point and they think, oh, actually, it was some of these classes that I took in the business school, maybe 10 years ago, that really now is incredibly relevant and resonate with me. And I think at that point, they are able to get into that C-suite a lot easier. So I think my biggest take on this is take a longer term horizon when you think about your ROI. Don't forget everything that you learned in the MBA, and treasure the kind of network and partnership and relationships that you've been able to build while you were here, and continue to grow that. You'll be surprised just how useful that network can be.
Right. With LBS celebrating this year its 60th birthday, Anne, I think David has done most of those years, but he won't. That's for us to consider. An alum 10 years out, as Conrad had suggested, 20, 30 years out, that they come back and they share with you a path that they followed, the successes that they've enjoyed. How do you think they then, with hindsight, measure the ROI of an MBA?
The ROI tends to be a conversation at the starting point when people make the investment of time and money. When we are looking that far out, people talk about the transformational experience they've had on all levels, the personal and the professional. I would also go back to the individual. It depends very much on your starting point, on your goals. Are you coming to LBS to start a business? Well, that might take some time to take off, obviously. And it really depends on what is your goal, what are you measuring it against. So I would say, in addition to what Conrad said, the long term, also look at where would I be if I wasn't educating myself? Where would that take me in 10, 20, 30 years' time? Because it might not be the specific technology, but it's learning how to deal with the changes in technology. That's what you're learning in the classroom. That's what you're grappling with. And that will help you adapt over time as technologies change. Right now, we're talking about AI. It might be slightly a different flavor if we're talking again next year.
With what Anne is describing, Lisa, when you're working with students, perhaps on interviewing, networking, is there always the sense of, here are some things for now, for, the first position coming out of school, but equally, here are things to think that this is just a first step, a stepping stone, perhaps, that will then be accompanied by step 2, step 3. So are you equally preparing them for those years beyond school when they've graduated?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really important not just to support students for their first job on graduation, but for that ongoing career success, whatever that looks like for each individual student or alumnus. So I think, offering ongoing career support to our alumni is a key part of that. having that kind of virtuous, if you want, cycle of alumni supporting our current MBA students with where they, better understanding the market, better understanding, some of that commercial awareness or how to tap into that, some of their lessons learned. But I think, for example, when you think about that networking piece, it's how you start it, even from before starting your MBA, but particularly during and afterwards. When we think about what I mentioned earlier about the importance of that kind of shift in the way experienced hires are being recruited, it's much more now towards opportunities that are less being advertised and are more maybe coming through networks or through recommendations, and that's known as the hidden jobs market. And it's widely agreed that about 70% of jobs at the experienced hire, which is anything above kind of 7 years experience, typically about 70% of people gain their opportunity through this sort of hidden jobs market, through networking, through recommendation. So those connections that students are gaining now, whether it's on their specific program or at Imperial, for example, across the MBA suite of programs that we run with the business school alumni, or again, across alumni across the whole of the university, that is the network that's setting you up for future success in your career. And so that kind of forward planning ahead and how you can continue to tap into and maintain those relationships that you build during the program are just as important as what happens during the program itself.
Lisa had mentioned, Conrad, that 10% of Imperial's recent class pursued careers around ESG, and maybe that number continues to grow in the years that follow. Ethical, socially responsible business, is that something that the students themselves are driving, or is it something that Judge is really wanting to provide a framework of reflection for them to adopt?
I think it's both tracks. So maybe about 5-6 years ago, we saw a small but growing group of students who were interested in sustainability, and we put on the academic side more and more classes that help students think about this. So we now have a core class on sustainable business development. We have more electives on sustainability, not just the technical side of how do you do carbon accounting or scope 3 emissions, but also things like impact investing, the circular economy. How does that affect supply chains? Right? And we see a lot more projects from potential employers, clients who have some ESG element to it. One group of students from last year's class, they went to a mile underground in Chile to look at one of the mining operations there and to think about how can a mining company become more sustainable. So I think it's partly the academic side. There's also a lot of stuff on projects and internships. And finally, I think more careers are coming on. Just as Lisa said, there are more employers who are thinking about sustainability and having sustainability in the job title, whether that's from a supply chain side, from finance, even things like on the strategy aspects. So it's all these elements, I think, coming together. So if people are interested in sustainability, I think you're going to have this golden period in the next couple of years.
I had approached that question and with Conrad, looking at two groups of stakeholders, the students and the school around ESG themes. And he introduced, of course, employers. The feedback that you get from employers about graduates of the school that do have that ethical compass, there is that sense of social responsibility. Is that something that they typically share?
That the students share?
No, that the employers,
No,
what we love about LBS graduates is, they have this sort of ethical compass and a sense of social responsibility.
I think you find everything, the whole breadth of employers, obviously, when you're looking at a global range of employers and different motivations. And I think it's important for students to keep their business hat on. If a company is making money for its shareholders, that might be its first prerogative, and then others alongside it. So I think just having general business awareness is always good. And I would say, go back to fundamentals. Just because a class has got a name tag on it because of something ESG, is that really what we need to do? I would say it's bringing in the fundamentals. When you're looking at microeconomics, look at ESG through the lens of what you're learning in the fundamentals of business school. Same with the job titles. If a job title has sustainability in it, that doesn't mean it's necessarily the better job than another one that doesn't. There are many roles in procurement, in supply chain, that can have a really great impact on sustainability, but you won't find that word in the job title. So I think it's going beyond and looking underneath the marketing and looking at the fundamentals. That's really important. In terms of the employers, I would say our students generally are not sustainability or ESG experts. So it's about how do you build that expertise and that knowledge that is valuable to an employer on top of the general leadership skills that you're learning during an MBA.
And in that dialogue, Lisa, with employers, I mean, you talked about a hidden job market at those secondary stages of a career, but how do you keep your ear to the ground of skill sets that are becoming increasingly important to us, to always reflect that in what you're then offering to students?
Yeah, and look, that's super important. So I think there's a number of different ways that we do that. I mean, the first is, of course, understanding what the latest is coming out of all the research, particularly from the university itself, right? A STEM-based institution, we're lucky enough to benefit from hearing the cutting edge insights that are coming through that we know are then going to impact on industry. The second, of course, is what we're hearing from industry itself and what we're seeing in some of those, institute reports and so on that are regularly coming out about, where are the skills gaps? What are the skills that they're seeking? And actually, we have just hot off the press this year introduced a new employability skills framework across all of our programs at Imperial and the Business School to really help students to understand what are the key skills that employers are seeking that are really valued, not just now, but expected to be valuable, in the next few years, in the future, as we're moving forward, to future-proof those a little bit as well, to help students to then do a bit of a skills mapping, to help them understand, where are they against some of those skills, and how can they verbalize and how can they talk about the skills that they have to employers who are seeking those. Whether it's things like, and I won't go through, of course, the whole framework, but just to give a couple of examples, of course, we've been talking about kind of those analytical skills, but also creative thinking, which is so important as well. Analytical and creative thinking continue to top the list of skills in a wide range of reports that are coming out from, World Economic Forum, for example, amongst others. Of course, AI and digital literacy, we've touched on that already, and I think there's a certain baseline of kind of knowledge and kind of digital skills that employers are expecting students to have now, regardless of their degree, or their specialism. And then, of course, there's those communication skills, which, have always been talked about. But I think, you mentioned how we don't talk about soft skills. I like the term human skills, to balance out against all those kind of computers and machines and the AI, etc. And whether that's empathy or whether it's able to communicate what's the data actually telling us, the storytelling piece. And so these are all skills that we really help, through the academics and through the extracurricular and careers, help the students to build out through their programme.
Right. Conrad, if I think about the changing needs of my beloved football team, we clearly need strikers who can score goals, and we need defenders that can stop goals. And I think we probably need something in the middle too. But if we put it in a broader scale of the business world and what Lisa was just describing, the MBA versus the specialized masters, as any of our viewers are thinking about, do I take that specialist route versus the more general management focus of the MBA? What would you encourage them to think about to then be well equipped for the future job market and being effective business leaders?
I think there's space for both, right? And it really comes down to the individual. If you have already spent a few years in developing your technical skills in a particular function, and you want to make that leap to general management or leadership, then you'll need more than just deepening expertise. You need to understand how businesses work and develop this sort of personal impact, leadership skills that probably an MBA is better placed to provide. But if you want to go deeper into a particular area, whether that's in technology, supply chain, finance, it's marketing, etc., then maybe that specialized masters can give you that runway for the next couple of years. But I think the beauty of the business schools that we have here in the panel is that in our schools, we all have that mix of people. So I'd encourage students, right? Don't just stay in your program, but network and meet people from the different sort of programs. You could be, if you're an entrepreneur, you could find maybe a co-founder or people who can help you on the technical side. If you're moving into a particular industry, then maybe if your school has the specialized masters in those industries, that could be people that you should build links with, and that could help you in the years to come. So I think those are the kinds of considerations people, business school candidates should think about. But I think it's one where once you get into business school, everybody is a business school student, and just don't think I'm an MBA, you're a specialized master's, never the twain shall meet. Just interact, network.
And maybe, beyond the MBA and the specialized masters, different age group, because of course London Business School has the Sloan program, executive education, and the executive MBA. You've equally got the early careers masters, and so how the MBA can then connect with younger students, individuals that perhaps already have 15. Is that something that you see a lot of? It's a bigger community than just the MBA cohort.
Absolutely. And there's some lovely examples of reverse mentoring, where recently we had an event called Grow Your LBS Network, where we brought together students across the different programs. And it was actually one of those early careers, now we call them graduate master students, who introduced one of the Sloan students, so one of the more experienced students, to someone she worked with. And she facilitated a networking conversation between them. And there are many more examples like that. So I think it's really important that people look at inclusion and diversity also across the experience and the age levels.
Lisa, perhaps a final question for you. Candidates say, oh, I'm not sure it's the right time. Is there a right time? And let's have this as a question for all of you, but Lisa, let's start with you. In terms of when to go to business school, is that a false problem?
I mean, look, I don't think there ever is a perfect time. And if we wait for that perfect time, it will never come. I think probably the same is true for any major decisions in our lives. I think particularly with an MBA, you need to be kind of ready to be thinking and self-reflecting. You need to be ready to be open to feedback. You need to be ready to, embrace change and opportunity. You need to be really starting to think about what's next for you in terms of your career. So maybe you've got 3-4 years or whatever behind you, and you're starting to think, where do I want to go next? Where's the next step in my career going to be taking me? Maybe you're wanting to do a pivot, and how can you make that pivot? Whether that's a change of location or a change of sector, for example. And that's where an MBA can be really beneficial and can really help in those instances.
Right, Conrad, I wrote a piece about the over 30s applying to business school. It was read by over 315,000 people. So we weren't all 25 and knew that business school would come next. Is there a right time?
I think it's, as Lisa said, there's no perfect time. And everybody who joins business school, they're taking a risk, right? They're taking a risk that their careers are going to accelerate after 1 or 2 years, much faster than they would if they'd stayed on in whatever role they had. They're also taking a risk in terms of their personal circumstances, whether that's financial, maybe they have families that they're thinking about. I think that's part of the learning process, right? To think for yourself, how do you balance all those risks and make that kind of leap? If I just wear my admissions hat here, I would also say that the school is taking a risk on you, because you can look great on paper, but when you get here, everybody has to go through that kind of learning process and show that sort of resilience. So I think both the schools and the students, they're both taking risks. And if we can work together, help each other to get across and get those sort of lifelong careers that everybody wants, then I think that would be a really successful kind of partnership.
And a risk worth taking, perhaps that's something that alumni reflect back to you a lot.
It does take a leap of faith to make that sort of investment in yourself, to trust yourself that you can really make best use of it. And it does put you in the driver's seat, because at business school, we give all of those resources, and then it's up to the students to take them on and make the most of it. So yes, a risk worth taking. I do think there's the right time. You do need to have enough experience to contribute meaningfully to the class discussions, contribute meaningfully to the community. But beyond that, really, I think it boils down again to the individual choices of where do you want to go next, and does that make sense? So speak to the alumni, get some feedback on that. They will tell you if they see that actually maybe it would be better if you wait a year or two. You will get that sort of feedback. So do reach out and speak to people who have been there, who have done it. You will hear it from them.
So viewers, a leap of faith, an investment that you're making in yourselves, and any of our best decisions are informed decisions. So to be joined by Conrad, by Anne and Lisa in the last 45 minutes to really be able to reflect on that, it was an incredibly thoughtful and a very encouraging session in terms of everything that you offer. I'm glad that Centre Court can share your voices, the work of your teams, because it's so integral to this learning journey of the MBA student. It was an absolute pleasure to have the three of you with us. Thank you very, very much indeed.